Welcome back to Aymara, the Andean New Year celebration here in Tiwanaku, a stone's throw away from the Peruvian border, and the site of the former Tiwanaku capital and the empire's largest known city. At its height, home to an estimated 10 to 20,000 inhabitants, as well as some unique masonry, including ornate portals, stone monoliths, and most notably, tenon heads lining the walls of the site's semi-subterranean temple. The ruins, just off Highway 1 between La Paz and Puno, are certainly worth a visit, especially if your visit just so happens to coincide with the sacred celebration of the winter solstice. And with that unexpected yet delightful detour out of the way, we departed Tiwanaku and continued our ride from La Paz to Desaguadero, where we will say farewell to Bolivia and hello to Peru, before continuing along the shores of Lake Titicaca, the largest lake in South America, sitting at over 3,800 meters, 12,500 feet high in the Andes, to Puno. Titicaca is often called the highest navigable lake in the world, although we're not exactly sure what definition of navigate fits that criteria. But before we could contemplate this and many more meaningless questions, we first had to survive another border crossing and the telltale traffic, crowds, and chaos that more often than not accompany such an occasion.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, this looks like the border.
It looks like.
Mm-hmm.
After an uneventful departure from Bolivia, we stopped at the Desaguadero River on the 30th day of our 30-day visa to take one final look at what had become one of our favorite countries.
It's the river between Peru and Bolivia. Alrighty. Where? Hey, flamingos! Rose's favorite flamingos.
Look, they're right in the center.
Yep.
They're not either country.
They're international waters.
Flamingo Island.
Alright, ciao Bolivia. Until next time.
Crossing into Peru, Chad's first foray into the country in over 4 years, we proceeded to the local immigration office, which, after the last 4 weeks in Bolivia, seemed tame by comparison.
Looks like it's just us.
After the obligatory crossing of T's and dotting of the I's, and a quick search of our luggage, we descended into town to exchange the few Bolivianos we still had for soles, topped off the tank,
Hopefully this will be enough to get some gas.
and made the 2-hour run into the setting sun to San Carlos de Puno. The next morning, we embarked on a tour of the lake. With a surface area of over 8,300 square kilometers, 3,200 square miles, Titicaca, straddling the border of Peru and Bolivia, is home to over 42 natural islands, and more famously, an estimated 60 artificial ones. Puno's main attraction and home to the Uros people. These floating islands are constructed of hand-hewn blocks of natural sedge, a type of buoyant reed that are tied together and anchored to the bottom of the lake. The surface is then covered with the reeds themselves, which are also used as food, fuel, to construct homes, and the dragon boats the Uros people famously use to commute from island to island or back to the mainland. Today, an approximate 1,500 inhabitants are spread across the 60 or so floating islands, each generally consisting of a few extended families and their own loose political structure. On both the floating islands as well as the Isla del Sol, Titicaca's largest island, which just so happens to be on the Bolivian side of the border. The Uros and Tiwanaku subsistence economies are now largely driven by tourism. Subsidized primarily through permits sold to large tour groups, such as ours, selling handicrafts, boat rides, and tips for various performances. A controversial and divisive topic among many indigenous communities. One that, more often than not, leaves a bad taste in our mouths. But that is another subject for another day. In the meantime, we'll settle for a beautiful first day in Peru, including a slight detour back to Bolivia before returning to Puno and continuing our ride north. Our loose plan over the next couple of days included a brief tour of Sillustani, a pre-Incan cemetery, before continuing along Highway 3S toward Cusco, with a pit stop in Sicuani, and another detour somewhere right around here, an hour off the highway and a donkey ride into the mountains to Vinicunca, the mountain of 7 colors. But first,
Hola, buenas.
Días,
¿Cómo está?
día más, hay que pagar 15 soles por persona.
this is Sillustani, burial grounds of the Qulla people, descendants of the Inca-conquered Aymara. These above-ground funeraries, called Chullpa, at one time housed the remains of entire extended families. While cylindrical stone tombs are common throughout the central Andes, these are amongst the most preserved, despite many having been destroyed by dynamite-wielding grave robbers. Just a short scenic hike from the motorcycle, and poised above the modern-day village of San Antonio de Humayo and its picturesque namesake laguna, Sillustani is certainly worth a brief detour, especially for a couple of cemetery junkies such as ourselves.
Gracias.
With that out of our system, we settled in for the long ride to Sicuani, past burnt-out and abandoned toll booths, remnants of the social unrest that gripped southern Peru earlier in the year. When, as often happens, something shiny caught Chad's eye, and he decided to veer off the highway, only to discover this: a forgotten bridge over an unknown river that made for some entertaining photos.
I think the bridge is out. Hope this thing doesn't come down on me. Oh man. Alright, well, I think I finally found the confounded bridge. I'm pretty sure I can ride across this. You think we can ride across it?
Nope.
No? Alright.
I can barely walk across it.
Luckily, in a rare moment of restraint, we decided to forego riding the confounded bridge and continued riding north, albeit at a snail's pace, because in this part of the world, there's no shortage of detours for those of us that are easily distracted. Which is what makes this type of travel, largely unplanned and almost entirely unscheduled, so fulfilling. Like a couple of school children enjoying an infinite recess. After an uneventful night in Sillustani, we jumped back on Highway 3S and made the short ride to the obscure turnoff for La Montaña de Colores.
Hola, ¿cómo está? Pregunta, ¿este es el camino por la montaña de Colores? Sí. ¿Sí? Ok. Ya, ¿y cuánto tiempo más o menos?
Más o menos 20 minutos y después se camina todavía casi 1 hora.
Ah, perfecto. Ya, muchas gracias. Gracias, chao.
Avenida Progreso passes through a number of rural, largely indigenous villages, some of which charge a toll for the right to pass.
Hola, buen día. ¿Cómo está? Sí. Por favor.
A 5 soles.
Sí.
But whatever the toll, destination aside, the steep ride, climbing ever higher into the Peruvian Andes, is certainly worth the cost of admission.
Hola, buenas. ¿Cómo está?
Amigos, buenos días. La entrada es 30 soles cada uno.
30, pero uno.
20 soles?
Sí.
Here, I have it.
¿Cuánto cuesta esa moto, no? ¿Cuánto cuesta esa moto?
¿Cuánto cuesta?
Sí,
Oh, ¿en dólares?
sí.
10,000.
$10,000.
Sí,
O sea,
en Estados Unidos, sí.
40,000 soles.
Sí.
40,000 soles, ¿no?
Ya,
Sí.
ya.
Okay.
Chao.
¿Listo?
Chao, amigos.
Muchas gracias. Chao. Chao, chao. Chao.
We We timed our arrival to coincide with the exodus of the organized tour groups operating out of Cusco. Not only did that mean we would avoid the crowds, but we wouldn't have enough time to make the 3-hour-plus round trip on foot. But ascending to over 5,000 meters, 15,000 feet above sea level, we weren't complaining.
I'm not apologizing for taking a horse.
Voy a arreglar, ¿ya?
My horse doesn't look happy. No, my horse is pissed. Doing my research on this particular excursion, I read that if you are old or infirmed, you should consider taking a horse as opposed to hiking.
We qualify.
Yeah, I think we qualify on both accounts, both old and infirmed. No shame in taking the horse.
Nearing the end of what had undoubtedly been a long day, neither our horses or our guides, who were essentially pulling our unwilling steeds up the mountain, seemed particularly happy. And unbeknownst to me, I was about to join their ranks. The final push to the viewpoint was too steep for the horses, and I was once again forced to hike. But at least this time, I wasn't the only one complaining.
You alright?
No.
Yeah. Old, fat, out of shape, broken foot, and overall a bad attitude. Hell of a combination. Not to mention about 1,000 steps.
But our bad attitudes, undoubtedly fueled by the steady onset of altitude sickness, were no match for the scenery.
Woo, you made it. We made it, just barely. Just barely, almost died.
I was fine.
Almost died on the horse, almost died on the hike. This guy's looking a lot better than we are. He's got the thumbs up.
This was my first taste of the Peruvian Andes. Chad's favorite part of the world's longest mountain range. And the beginning of what would be a months-long odyssey through one of the most culturally rich and beautiful countries in all of Latin America.
Woo. Don't fall.
Welcome to Peru.